You're tuned in to HorrorSlop, where the stories are rotting, truth is twisted, and sleep, forget about it.
Yeah, welcome to the pit. It's gross, it's creepy, and honestly, it's kind of my vibe. Hope you like nightmares, because tonight's tale, it slithers.
Straight from the darkest corners of Reddit. Real stories, real fear, and just enough blood to stain your soul.
So at least grab your bed sheets, so grab a flashlight, and maybe a therapist.
This is HorrorSlop. Every night starts somewhere, and this is where yours begins. First story, first chill. Let's see if you make it to the end.
The ocean has its silent caves. Over the course of the last few weeks of training, I'd memorized nearly every facet of the Tuscany, every dial and every readout and every knob and screen and nuance of structure, and the quality of the personal submarine's craftsmanship never ceased to astound me. It was a remarkable feat of engineering, this little beast, designed with such care that even the equipment on the hull could withstand more water pressure than the sea could muster up at any achievable depth. It was my Pegasus. My Trojan horse, my very own Apollo 11, and inside this matrix of layered syntactic foam I would follow the ballasts to the gratuitous and unexplored depths of Higgins Maw. I began the separation sequence, and the deep diver fell away from the escort and dipped beneath the surface of the Pacific with silence and grace and a few knots of speed, and then I was consumed in a whole new world, albeit one I'd frequented, that of the sea. Schools of fish swam on by me, and when their cloud passed through a sunbeam it glinted silver, and beneath them swam rays that rolled their wings to the beat of the current, and out in the rocks crawled the crustaceans and sat the plant life that spruced up all the whitewashed stones there like holiday ornaments. But I had an appointment to keep, and the oxygen tank was a demanding clock, so I dove right on past the old reef and out into the open waters where the seabed couldn't be seen for many, many miles yet. He'd nodded at that. "Are you ready to make history?" Was I? I thought I was. I'd prepared for this lonely dive and nothing else, for some years now. It was the culmination of a lifetime of work and study in the field, and so tight was its grip on my mind that I often dreamt of it in my sleep, of what I'd find at the bottom, and what it would mean. And what monstrous things might take offense to my presence there. The water began to blur and grain up and darken as the sunlight struggled to push on through. 2,000. 25. 3,000. 32, where the light no longer shines. 13,000 feet. The abyssal zone. Pressure stands at 11,000 psi. I saw an angler float by, and it was startled by the sheer volume of light spread by the Tuscany that dwarfed its own bioluminescent glow. It swam away, and I dove further. 15,000 feet. 3 miles. 3.1. Mankind had visited these depths almost infrequently enough to count the expeditions on a single pair of hands. I was now ranked among an illustrious few explorers, and although I wasn't the first to hit these marks, I'd hit the deepest one yet before this journey was over. I was determined and I was capable. So I checked the depth chart. 16,281.4 feet. Nearly halfway to the world record. The Tuscany continued its dive. 20,000 feet down. The Hadal zone. Pressure here is 1,100 times what it is at the surface. 22,000 feet. 26. 29,000, the height of Mount Everest. 30. 30.5. 31, the same distance from the surface as a commercial airliner at the peak of its flight. But I was going somewhere vastly deeper, even, than that. "All we know is we found a canyon," Reuben had said. "Dwarfs the Grand, sitting dead center in the Pacific seabed. About 1,200 kilometers west of Hawaii, and another 900 south, and, near as we can figure, some 50,000 feet straight on down. 36,000 feet. I was now tied for the world record. 50,000 feet. Why the hell are we just now seeing it? 37. So what's down there? 37-9. And there are those for whom we weep. The young, the bright, the fair. Higgins Maw, according to the best information available to me at the time of departure, is a pit, roughly a full kilometer across. It begins at approximately 46,000 feet below the surface and is estimated to bottom out at Higgins Deep, a small valley that sits at its base, some 5,000 additional feet below that. The Maw is the largest and deepest such formation in the hydrosphere, and yet its dimensions and location are the only things concretely known about it. That, of course, is where myself, and where the Tuscany, come in. 43,000 feet down. I hit the floodlights underneath the Tuscany, and the glow washed over an alien landscape that likely hadn't seen light in over 1 billion years. There were mountains here, mountains, ones that rivaled the Alps, and wild arches and plateaus that stretched far off to a murky horizon before being shrouded by seawater. Atta girl. 44,000 feet. 45. My mouth hung by the jaw as the sheer scope of the beast came into view. It was a breathtaking sight to behold, a monstrously large and equally dark hole in the crust of the earth that plummeted to inconceivable fathoms. I descended a bit further, 45,500, 46,000 feet, and Tuscany fell into its yawn. Somehow things were even blacker in the depths of the thing, even though sunlight had long since been blotted out. 46,500. 47. 47-2. I began to become aware of a low current pulling me downward. It wasn't particularly powerful, but it was unexpected and it was therefore alarming. And yet I couldn't bear to pull myself back up. Not yet, I'll turn around if it gets bad, so down I went, deeper and deeper and deeper still into the cavern. 48,000 feet. 48,500. 49. 49-1. And then I saw it. A glow. I squinted and dimmed my lights to confirm the intuition. What in the name of God? It was there indeed, a dim reddish purple, then green, then purple again, and then blue, floating on a mist of current some few thousand feet down. I resumed the dive to chase it. 49.5. 49.7. 49.9. The glow, whatever it was getting deeper, and wider, and brighter. Soon it filled up the whole path down and ahead. I dimmed the Tuscany's underlights to their lowest setting, and by 50,000 feet I could see that the glow was coming from somewhere not directly beneath me, but off to the left and around a wide corner. Holy God! Holy God! Beneath their own blue sea. The ocean solitudes are blessed. For there is purity. Clack. Come on, baby. I hit the thrusters again, and Tuscany rocketed off the way it came, through the darkness and off towards the pods, whose glow I hoped would afford me an opportunity to shut the lights off the ship and make my escape. But very soon I began to hear and feel the movement of something unspeakably titanic rolling across the floor of the chamber. It rumbled and thundered, and shuddered and shook, and soon clouds of dirt and rock flew up out of the black pitch and blanketed the view forward, and I could hear boulders smack against the ceiling of the cave before sinking again to where they'd been. F fuck. The sound had erupted across the entire breadth of the cave at once. My eardrums nearly burst and likely would have, had it not been for muffling of the explosion provided by the walls of the Tuscany. The submarine shook, too, but she held up her integrity well enough for me to fly on past the floating pods, some of which were now knocked about on their sides and rolling, and back towards the yawning mouth of the tunnel that would take me back out into the open deep-s. The Tuscany buckled and rolled with an impact. The tentacle, I realized, had shot up from the ground and hit the bottom of the ship between her ballasts, but luckily it knocked her with force up towards the tunnel. I rolled Tuscany with the hit and managed to regain some control, and I boosted the thrusters into the turn and up again, now back into the maw. Then I began to climb. 50.5. 50. 49.9. 49.6. Tuscany ascended with panicked speed, and all the while she did it I could feel the rumbling of the tentacle's pursuit in the walls of the pit. It smashed its way on through the tunnel, and whipped and thrashed, but Tuscany was too quick a runner. 47.5. 47. 46.8. 46.4. 46,000 feet and climbing high. I suppose not. The tentacle smashed along behind me. Mainmasts and battlements and flat decks and rusted iron and wooden boat hulls were splintered up and tossed to the winds of the sea, never again to reconvene. I took Tuscany through this nautical graveyard with far, far too much speed for my safety. Under ship towers we went, and through cannon mounts and past the blades of dead engines and around upended rudders. But it seemed there was no escape to be found here. The entire ground for countless miles shook and rumbled with seismic force. It was thunderously loud, and it picked up speed and violence with time. Tuscany finally flew up to miss a splintered crow's nest atop the mast by less than a foot, and finally used that directed momentum to put away distance between the seabed and herself with as many knots of speed as her thrusters would allow without bursting from the effort. The depth chart began to rise. 45.9. 45.2. 45,000 feet. 44.8. Come on, you dash. Beside me in the glow I could make out other creatures retreating, too. Ones of spectacular size, again, that mankind had never catalogued and that I, sadly, would not have time at all to study. There were city bus-sized manta-ray-shaped things, wrapped up in clouded wisps of transparent jelly, and even that squid the size of a building, all flying upwards in a mass panic. I led the charge. 43.1. 42.8. 42.3. 42. I looked behind me and down through the rear window. The maw had moved. It was alive. God Almighty. I was in the Leviathan's throat. I was in its fucking throat. I saw its tentacle tongue lash out of the maw and collect enough fish to feed a small town. Tuscany rocketed ever upwards as the Leviathan whipped even larger tentacles behind it and gained speed with the force of a hurricane. 39.5. 39. 38.7. 38.2. 38,000 feet, and climbing. But the Leviathan pursued me relentlessly, riding on the flood of its own current. Its tentacles, each dozens of feet across and a mile long, beat the water back and tried to gain speed for their host. 37.5. 37. 36.4. Tuscany had proved her worth with speed, and the pressure gauge now fell in jumps. It remained in the red and would for some time, but it was falling steadily, even as the depth chart rose. 29,000 feet. 28.3. 27.5. 15.925. 15.94. 15.96. Shit. And that was it, Tuscany was caught, and no sooner did the depth chart begin to slip than did I feel the whole submarine lose all sense of control and tumble backwards and around. I was thrown out of my seat and smacked my nose against the roof of the pilot sphere. Blood exploded, and it drenched my shirt and sprayed the glass and the entirety of the control set. I grabbed my face and began to apply pressure to slow the blood loss, but Tuscany again flipped ballast over ballast to starboard in the whirlpool and spilled me into the hatch ladder. I felt my shoulder dislocate and my kneecap smack into the bottom rung. My head swam, and still Tuscany tumbled backwards. The cracks on the windows spread faster. 16-3. 16-4. Now. The sound of the roar was so close every last control surface in the sphere rattled in its case. My eardrums rattled, too, but then I flared up the thrusters again, full blast and at an angle, and the Tuscany shuddered and flipped and shook and, with fortune, fell straight out of the maelstrom with inches to spare. I felt the edge of the Leviathan's maw graze the starboard side, and the impact again sent me into the roof while the ship rolled end over end over end again. I smacked my ribs up on a dip in the alcove and fell back down into the seat, head first, and then out onto the floor. I managed to right myself with my good arm and get my bearings. I was free, but only just. The Tuscany banked and tumbled again and rolled, slower now in the absence of the whirlpool's flood current, but not yet in control of its pull. I tried to steer away, but it was useless. The ship flipped around the back of the Leviathan's titanic maw and up over its head as the beast flew on by underneath me like a freight train. And for the first time since catching the monster's eye I began to fully appreciate the magnitude of its size. Its back was an endless, snake-like and sharp-finned spine the size of a minor mountain range, and only quick maneuvering moved Tuscany away from the jagged back fins that chugged up towards me and sliced open the sea itself. They missed me by feet, and the blast of the current they'd swept up sent the submarine reeling backwards, off a bit further and into relative safety. I quickly dimmed the lights to their lowest setting and caught my breath, as the full form of the Leviathan washed on past me. It stretched far away into the abyss below, for well over a mile, and dragging away behind it were thousands upon thousands of tentacles, a forest of the things, each the size of a 6-lane highway and tipped with razor-sharp hooks and a flurry of wing fins. It took a full 3 minutes for the beast to pass by me fully. And then it curved around in the other direction, and swam off in search of other things to devour. The earth has guilt, the earth has care. But peaceful sleep is ever there. Related.
Sleeping yet? Didn't think so. Next story's up. And yeah, it's worse. You're welcome.
When I was 15, I lived in southern Sweden in a rather old wooden house next to a large cornfield. The floorboards creaked as you walked across them, and the once smooth, dark red paint of the house had started to peel, but I didn't complain, because every day there was food on the table, and every night I went to bed upstairs in my room. Sometimes, I thought I could hear whispers in the wind outside my bedroom window, the one that never quite shut all the way. Dad always said there was nothing to be afraid of out there, that it was just my wild imagination. And I believed him. My parents, Lars and Katrin, worked hard every day with the animals and the harvest, while I helped out when I could. It was a simple life, but one we were happy with. Something that made our family a bit different was that we never slaughtered our farm animals. We loved them too much, and after naming every chicken and cow, the bond was too strong, they simply became part of the family. Dad and I took turns naming the cows, and Mom got to name all the chickens. I named my first cow Majken. She always waited for me right by the fence when I came home from school, so I liked her a little more than the others. Sometimes I'd even bring bread from school for her to eat. I haven't thought about that summer in a long time. But sometimes, when the wind is just right, I swear I can still hear Majkens mooing, far out in the fields. Now I'm going to read the last pages from my diary, the ones I wrote just before my life turned upside down and changed forever. It makes me so angry. Our closest neighbor is a kilometer away and the town is 20 kilometers off. Who the hell would come out here in the middle of the night and steal a bunch of corn? But, you can't stay angry forever. Now I'm going to eat my porridge and go to sleep. Hopefully I won't hear the voices tonight. August 7, 1983. 9:15 p.m. Last night I woke up around 2:45 a.m. with a headache, so I got up to get a glass of water and try to fall back asleep. I was just about to head downstairs when I heard Mom and Dad talking downstairs. Mom said, "It's not normal for her to start hearing them this early. We need to tell her." Dad replied that it was too soon to tell me about her, and that I wouldn't be able to sleep for weeks. I hurried back to my room as quietly as possible, trying to step on the few floorboards that didn't creak, and finally jumped into bed. I was scared, but also satisfied. I fell back asleep and woke up at 8. No nightmares last night. August 8, 1983. 3:30 a.m. I'm so confused I don't even know what to write right now. About 20 minutes ago, I woke up to a loud thump followed by a sharp, splintering sound, wood breaking. I quickly threw on my nightgown and ran downstairs barefoot and sweating. Everything was quiet. Too quiet. I barely whispered a soft, "hello," before a door opened behind me. Mom and Dad stepped out of their bedroom. "Sorry, did I scare you?" Dad asked. His voice sounded dry, almost mechanical. The door got stuck. I had to kick it open, we got trapped inside. Mom stood beside him, smiling. But it wasn't her smile. It was too wide. Too stiff. I'm going to try to get some more sleep, but it might be hard. August 8, 1983. 10:10 p.m. It's been quiet. Too quiet. The voices in the wind have stopped whispering. I don't know if it's the calm before the storm or if they've just moved on to someone else. Mom smiles more now. But it's a stiff smile, like someone taught her how to smile without really understanding the feeling behind it. Dad too. They move like they should, say the right things, but there's something in their eyes. They follow me for too long. Like I'm something they're waiting on. At first I thought maybe I was imagining it. But this afternoon, I heard Mom talking to someone in the kitchen. When I peeked in, she was alone. Silent. Staring out the window toward the field. When she turned to look at me, she smiled. That smile again. I have to stop writing now. I hear footsteps on the stairs. August 13, 1983. 6:30 p.m. Majken is gone. I've searched the entire field, called her name until I lost my voice. Not even hoofprints in the mud. It's like she just vanished. Dad says she must have escaped through the back fence, but I checked. The wire's intact. Everything's untouched. I froze. The tears burned, but my legs started moving on their own. I grabbed my little backpack, stuffed in a sweater, a bottle of water, and the diary. August 16, 1983. 3:30 p.m. I'm gone. I'm still running in my mind, but I'm gone. When I opened the door and ran, I heard their shouts behind me. Not yet, come back, stop for God's sake. It wasn't their voices. It sounded like someone trying to learn how to speak human. Dad, the one who looks like Dad, grabbed me. He pinched my arm so hard I thought my skin would tear, but I broke free. The Meadow Mother lives. And she is waiting. The voices have returned. They whisper the same things as before, but more forcefully now. As if they're no longer asking me to listen, they're making me. Last night I heard someone calling my name from the woods outside my window. Just like before. I live in an apartment. In the city. There is no forest here. For years I've had nightmares about the field. About Majken. About Mom's eyes when they suddenly lost all emotion. But only now do I feel something actually moving inside. Something that isn't mine. I know I won't make it. That's why I'm writing this. So someone will know what happens when she finally takes over. Maybe she already has. Soon I'll go there. Not because I want to. Because she wants to. And I'm tired of saying no.
You're still tuned to HorrorSlop. Frequency unknown. Stories endless. Let's spin the next nightmare.
A customer is sending me photos of missing people, by mysterious Cream 1206. Most of the orders I receive from people are online, usually including wedding invitations, custom stickers, awkward school photos, and designed posters we ship off once they're printed and packaged up. Admittedly, owning a print shop isn't the most exciting career in the world, but it puts food on the table for me and my family. The email read, I need these images printed at 11 by 14 on matte paper, 200 GSM. Each page needs to have a half-inch white border around the photo. One-sided. Then, I need you to bind them with coils into a book. I want a front page for this book with a title in the center that reads, in cursive, Faces in Passing, Volume 1. Let me know how much I owe you for one copy. Accuracy is critical. Some men and women look to be in their 20s, 30s, 40s, or higher. There were also a few kids and teenagers in the collection. The sketched ones irked me a little. But as long as this person paid me, I didn't see any real issue. Immediately, I got an alert on my phone for one payment of $28.42. So, I printed off the book and got it all ready. Then a USPS worker came to pick it up along with the other packages that UPS didn't take. Done, and done. I got to work after that, and out of curiosity, I pulled that file up again. Looking through, I stumbled on Sarah's photo again. An officer called me back, saying he looked into the email, but it was untraceable. The address I sent the package to was a house with no residents. I asked if there was anything else they could do, but he told me they couldn't really do anything since no crime had actually been committed. A week went by before I received another email from them, much to my disdain. I need another book. Same deal as before, but this time put Volume 2 instead. Only one copy is needed. Payment has been sent, they said. Now that I knew what this was, there was no way I was going to give them what they wanted. Honestly, I wanted nothing to do with it. Before I responded to this email, I looked at the zip file that was attached. One of the pictures was of my wife. Dialing 911, I drove all around town to search for her. I must have asked everybody around town if they saw her. But she vanished. I reached out to the mysterious email and pleaded with them. In a desperate attempt, I begged and said I would even pay money if that's what they wanted.
Alright, quick break before our next story. Let's check in with our resident spooky dude. Hey, you ever smile, or is your face just stuck that way?
I smiled once. The sky bled. A child vanished. Never again.
Okay, drama. Maybe next time just try a dad joke.
Knock knock. They never made it to the door.
Wow. Fine, stay moody. Anyways, back to the darkness. This next one's got teeth.
Lucky's is also always open. Always. Working long shifts serving drifters and truckers and runaways, those who have become impermanent out on the highways, you get to know how to read people pretty quick. When you move around that much, always on the road, you leave parts of yourself behind sometimes, lost between the miles. Sometimes, people are just driving because there's nothing else left to do. Working at Lucky's, I've seen all sorts of lost things. I've seen the highway on fire, lines of flames between tires as the asphalt set itself alight in the heat. I've seen roadside baptisms, preacher pulled up with a van and a kiddie pool. I've seen things walking out in the desert just beyond reach of the neon sign for the motel that don't look quite like people, shifting out in the blue night. I met a woman who showed me a photograph of the place she was buried. I often meet people who you talk with a while until their faces start to flicker, can't quite hold up the pretense that long. I've met people who have to be invited inside, before they can cross the threshold. I've met some lovely members of a sacrificial cult who tipped well and were oh so polite, even when they asked me if I'd consider letting them harvest me. But this is a story about, well, you read the title. Rosemarie, our first and most frequent regular, was sat by the window in her brown fur coat, always drawn about her shoulders come rain or shine. Not that it ever rained here. Her hair was long and white down her back, like the moon through a glass. She waved over to me, gracing me with a wink that made her crow's feet deepen, all the more beautiful for it. Rosemarie liked whiskey in her tea. Sometimes, she fed cake crumbs to the voodoo dolls she carried in her pockets. She was also a chronic insomniac and liked the company of luckies when sleep was hiding from her. Table 6 was empty, and spotless as usual. It was the only table without a salt shaker, and the only one I never placed cutlery on. Only one person ever sat there. Our second regular, Jones, was sat in his usual booth, dregs of his black coffee held tight between his hands, badge resting on the table. He had his eyes closed, head bent down like he was repenting, steam curling off the lip of the mug and wrapping round his fingers. Jones was my favorite of our customers, not that I'd ever tell him. I walked past the booth and slid a bowl of sugar packets along the tabletop until it hit the mug with a soft clink. He jumped, reaching for his holster out of habit, until his eyes focused and he saw me. Sometimes I can sense the sad in people just by the feel of their skin. They carry it around with them, bone deep, trying to hide it from the world. But sometimes you can lift it from them for a minute or two, if you have enough kindness spare. It doesn't take much, most times. Jones was too young to be that sad. And yet. Lou the fry cook had cried when I told him that the other day. I really liked Lou. He was almost too big to fit through the service door, and had a tattoo of his dog just below the one of the angel of death on his shoulder. Lou sheds a tear for most things. The dead raccoons were always finding by the back door with their hands missing. Whenever there's a new missing poster plastered over the cracked glass of the phone booth in the parking lot. Every time he hears I Will Forever Hate Roses when it decides to pop up on the jukebox. Big guy, bigger heart. Always tired, Jones said as I poured. Another girl had gone missing yesterday. As I poured, I made sure to brush his thumb where it rested on the cup handle with the inside of my wrist, lifting out that sadness as far as I could. He smiled up at me, shy, and I smiled back before I could stop myself. I walked on to the next booth, two truckers with faces that had seen too much sun. One was showing the other the photos of his new baby in his wallet. He had tobacco-stained teeth, a scab on his cheek and wind-chapped lips, and his smile was the most beautiful damn thing as he talked about his kid, lit up like Christmas morning. He showed me too as I refilled his coffee, and I stayed and talked to them a while. I know where I buried him, Sylvia Dash. You don't know Jack's hit. We dug for hours, and dash. My mom always taught me eavesdropping was rude, so I left them to it and headed into the kitchen. But I got the sense that wherever they had left, whoever he was, he certainly wasn't there no more. I felt like telling them, but like my mom said, it's not polite to listen to other people's conversations. You never know what you'll wish you hadn't heard. Carlos handed me a plate of pancakes. Carlos had worked here so long he'd known my mom, and was the only one who knew my real name. He sometimes came with me on the weekends to change the flowers on her grave. He always brought her desert flowers, growing from the same earth she was. Carlos was also the only one who knew the recipe for the Lucky's pancakes, and the only one that could cook them right. On days when he wasn't working, we had no pancakes. Simple as. That was just the way it went. I'd learnt that the hard way, but that's another story. Along with the pancakes, came a warning. We leant over his huge shoulders to read what it said. Keep far from a false charge, and do not kill the innocent and righteous, for I will not acquit the wicked. Lou shrugged and patted me on the shoulder. I'd take your name. He gripped one of the pancakes in his fist, turning it to mush. Isabella, Isabella, Isabella. It don't suit. He suddenly slammed his hand up to his face, shoveling the crushed pancake into the gaping hole of his wide mouth. I jerked back, the movement was so sudden. I shoved my hands into my apron, reaching for the salt, and his eyes narrowed. I turned to face our third regular, relief mixing with fear in a swirling pit in my chest. Kinda like that feeling you get at a fairground in midsummer, when you've been on a carousel too long, and part of you knows you need to get off, but the other part doesn't want to leave because you know as soon as you stand still you're gonna be sick. Mr. Prince had that effect on people. Mr. Prince was dressed, as always, in his black pinstripe. His Stetson was darker than the night outside, and his boots shone like they were wet. If you didn't notice the upside-down crucifixes embroidered daintily onto his custom lapels, you'd think he was just a man with money, maybe mixed up in something a little shady, like oil, or pharmaceuticals. He was handsome by the way of his jaw, with his bone-white smile, but his black sunglasses were balanced on the bridge of his nose, silver-rimmed and gleaming, hiding his eyes as usual. When he spoke it was a drawl, dragged up from the depths of the South. Mr. Prince smiled, the way snakes do when they're watching you from the grass on their bellies. The cigarette was now smoking between his teeth, although he hadn't moved. Besides, Leroy ain't the type for salt. He's just a man. He looked him up and down and his top lip curled. Barely. He turned to Leroy. I see you started on my pancakes. But what's the point of good food if it ain't for sharing? Leroy giggled that strange high sound that made me want to run, and shook a little. Everything about Leroy made me nervous, fight or flight getting ready to flood my system. Mr. Prince handed Leroy a menu. Order whatever you want. He leant forward and the lights flickered. I wouldn't worry about him, darlin'. She crossed herself, and tapped the card on top of the pile. The Jack of Spades. It had its eyes scratched out. But not by Rosemary. It looked like it had been printed that way for years. We won't be seeing him again. She wasn't talking about Mr. Prince. She cupped my cheek and I leant into it, her hand rough with age, but warm. I could tell she thought I looked tired. She paid for her tea and toast, and walked out into the warm night waiting outside the doors. I finally made it back into the kitchen and was immediately attacked. Cold water doused me in the face and I threw up my arms on instinct, trying to protect my hair. Lou aggressively squirted me in the face with the spray bottle we also kept in the staff locker, the kind you use for tending house plants. Ours was filled with holy water. Lou. Jesus fucking Christ, get off I sputtered, and he sprayed me again. I spat holy water out, dripping down the front of my dress and wiped it from my eyes, makeup running a little. I grabbed the bottle from his hands. I think I'm good. I wasn't really mad though, better safe than sorry, especially when it comes to possession. Carlos kept his eyes firmly fixed on his hands as he started flipping patties, but I could sense him holding back a laugh, desperately clenching his teeth. I narrowed my eyes and aimed the spray bottle at him. Maybe you need some more, I threatened. Lou snorted and then Carlos was laughing and I was too, and that heavy feeling that had hovered over us since Mr. Prince had walked and lifted. It was coming up on 3 in the morning as I took the burgers back to table 6. Leroy visibly drooled and clapped his hands as I walked over. I put the plate in front of him as quick as I could, but as I pulled back, his head darted forward and he licked the inside of my wrist. His tongue was long and wet against my pulse. I recoiled like I'd been bitten and he laughed, shrill and manic. "Tell Carlos the pancakes were good as hell," he said, from behind his sunglasses. Then he chuckled, low and raspy, as if something he'd said was funny. He popped another Marlboro between his teeth and it started to glow, as Leroy shoveled meat down his throat. I tried not to gag as I watched it clog beneath his long nails. I walked by Jones on my way back. He waved me over, eyes creased with worry. He ran a hand over his face, as if he was trying to wipe all the bad things away. "Is he both Aaron, you?" He gestured over to Leroy who was rocking back and forth drinking his milk. Jones suddenly looked so tired, uniform creased as his face, looking 50 instead of his 22. "Nothing I can't handle," I shook my head and thought about Rosemary. "We won't be seeing him again." Mr. Prince turned to Leroy and grinned around his cigarette. "We've got a ways to go, the road we're talking. They say it's paved with good intentions." He chuckled, and I felt sick to my stomach. He took Leroy's hand, like a child, and they walked out into the night, warm and waiting. The doors swung shut behind them, even though nobody had touched them. The jukebox sputtered, and Chris Ray was on, singing about that road again. I placed the shoes on the table by Jones' empty coffee cup, and passed on the message. He sat still for a long time after, just watching them on the tabletop, trying not to cry or scream or punch a hole in the plaster. All I could do was refill his coffee, because when someone is trying to hold themselves together like that, there's nothing left to say.
Anyway, let's lighten the mood with something fun, and... Nah, just kidding. It gets worse. Hit it.
It's quite true, what they say, you only miss something once it is taken from you. On October 3 RD, 2003, I stopped hearing laughter. We were all huddled in a circle, beers in hand, exchanging the small, forgettable details of our lives. Fred was swamped with hospital work. Rob's 3 noisy kids occupied most of his time. John told us about his recent divorce, and his newfound hatred towards his ex-wife. I think that soured the mood a little. I could feel my entire body tighten. A violent chill ran down my back. "Tom." Frank's smile faded. "Are you all right?" he asked. I mumbled some excuse and said I should be going home. They were sad to see me leave, albeit somewhat confused. As I walked to my car, I heard Frank tell another joke. I didn't hear a reaction. That night, I told my wife, Sarah, what happened. She raised an eyebrow. Sarah gently shook her shoulders and smiled wide. I assumed it was a chuckle. Over the next few weeks, I became obsessed with my condition. I would watch comedy performances online, entranced by the eerie silence of the audience. I would eavesdrop on Sarah's phone calls with her friends, noting the occasional awkward gaps in conversation that followed a joke. Sarah grew increasingly concerned. The worst incident occurred at her birthday dinner, in her favorite restaurant. My mind was strangely at peace, and I was happy to simply sit there and enjoy everyone's company. Sarah's sister was telling some ridiculous story about her son misbehaving at school. Then suddenly, everyone at the table burst into motion. The room went silent. My heart got stuck in my throat. I knew what was happening. Tremoring hysterically, Sarah's sister smacked the table with one arm, clutching her chest with the other. All I could hear was the thud of her arm landing on wood. Tears began to stream from everyone's eyes, as they convulsed all around me, their laughter silent as the void. However, retelling my story brought me immense relief. I felt young again. I remembered my family, my friends, my wife. Their laughter. Perhaps I needed to get it off my chest. But then I hear it. A noise, from somewhere on the other end of the house. A laugh.
Whew, telling gave me chills. But hey, we're just getting started. The next one's sharper. You'll see.
And I had signed a non-disclosure agreement. But I have no recollection of divulging any information related to the projects I was exposed to there. I always wondered if they had agents tracking people, waiting for them to slip up and then. I really don't know. I went to the bar where I got drunk the other night, which is, I think it is relevant to say, a rare occasion, and asked the bartender if he heard me talking to anyone, and if he remembered what, if anything, I had said. Sounds like me. Even drunk. So it had nothing to do with violating the NDA. Funny how I assumed he was some kind of military agent. When I got to my kitchen, I noticed something strange. Everything seemed to be out of place by just a few inches, just barely enough to notice. The company I'd worked for had closed, being as it was a fully government-run operation under heavy classification. The technology we'd helped develop was highly classified, the type of technology that must remain clandestine to impart any significant strategic advantage. No answer. None of them. I'm actually afraid to eat now, because they might be poisoning my food. Make them so afraid of persecution, they slowly erode, have heart attacks and strokes, starve themselves in fear of poisoning, and whatever else. And it's clean. No trace. Just a heart attack. Happens all the time. Sometimes I wonder if I'm imagining all of it. But then I remember the note. Very funny. It seems targeted. My neighbor is on his phone and staring at me through his window. Has he been compromised? Or there are speakers somewhere in my house. But I don't think so. I tore my house apart, and found nothing. Last time I went to eat something, I noticed some kind of caustic solvent spilled on my counter. That wasn't from me. Or trying. I won't let them succeed. I don't deserve to die. This is their problem, not mine. Or your sanity at least. There's no escaping this. I think I'm going to eat. If it's poisoned, then I'm eating. But can you imagine the pain of being poisoned? And the humiliation? Even still, there's always some place you didn't look. I'll go over it again. Those speakers are somewhere. And if I find them, I'll know they can't read my thoughts, and I can eat. I'm starving. I mean actually starving. I'll go over the house one more time and check for those speakers. They're here somewhere. I am so hungry. I should check for cameras in here. But they can be hard to find. And my heart is beating arrhythmically. And my arm is numb.
Need a break? Too bad. These stories don't wait, and neither do we. Next one's worse. In the best way.
What the actual hell? After that message she continued to send me more and more of these videos. I asked her to stop sending me this fucked up stuff time after time. But of course she didn't stop. The only responses from her would. No. You need to see this so you'll understand. Ellen looked even more puzzled than before. I pulled out my phone and went to our text conversation and showed her what she'd sent me. You honestly don't know what I'm talking about, I said harsher than I meant to.
You feel that? That weird pressure in the room? Yeah, that's the algorithm. It knows you're watching, and it gets real cranky when you don't feed it. A simple ritual helps. Click the little thumbs up, tap subscribe, say its name 3 times into your phone mic. Kidding, probably.
Engagement appeases the darkness. You know what to do.
Good, human. Now, back to the horror.
I work as a tribal correctional officer. There are 5 rules you must follow if you want to survive. Part 8, by Gerald 24. Part 2. Part 4. Part 5. Part 7. Let me catch everyone up to speed on what happened. About 6 weeks ago, I woke up to a knock on my door. Nobody was there, but there was an envelope with a note and a thumb drive inside. The note contained Jay's logins for some of his online accounts and the message, "Will, it's time to stop pretending it didn't happen." I made sure nobody was watching and went inside. When I plugged the thumb drive into the computer, there was a single folder labeled Evidence. The first thing I noticed was a text document labeled, "For Will." I sat there in shock, just looking at the screen. I had just seen Jay the day before and everything was normal. We joked around and made plans to go on a hike over the weekend. He never made any comments about leaving or being worried about anything, but this had me replaying everything in my head. Every joke, every interaction, every goodbye. Nothing sticks out. Even now, nothing sticks out. He hid it well, even from me. I knew I had to open the file, but I couldn't. After a minute or two, I stood up and paced my room asking myself, where did he go? Why leave this to me? I know the answer to the former, that one was obvious, but the latter? That was the real question. One I'm still trying to figure out. I tried to lay back down and go to sleep, telling myself, get some rest and revisit this with a clean head. Of course, that only resulted in me tossing and turning until the sunlight filled my room. So, I did what I knew Jay wanted. I pulled myself out of bed, grabbed an energy drink, and opened the file he left for me. This time the call went through. Will. Mary's voice came through. She sounded like she was crying. Mary? I asked, almost yelling. Where's Jay? What's going on? Tears welled up in my eyes. I'm so sorry, Mary. There's no way this is real, right? They don't have a body, so there's a chance, right? Her question sounded more like begging. They said that there was only clothing and blood found. I asked to see the clothes or if they were going to test the blood to see if it's even a match to his blood type. Mary explained through sobs. They told me that they knew it was him and... What did they look like? I cut her off. What? Why? Jay told me if anything ever happened to him, to take care of you. Something in my gut screamed that this wasn't a private phone call. I remember that accident, and all he said was that he got hit by a drunk driver. Thinking back over the years, there were a few different times where he fell, had car trouble, or his house got broken into, but nothing was stolen. They all never added up, but I didn't think anything of it at the time. Hindsight being 20/20, they were messages disguised as unfortunate accidents. Starting with the first one, I opened it up. It was Ryan's. I remember when Ryan's obituary came out. This one was different from the one that I had framed in my living room next to his picture. The contents were the same, but the publication date was different. The one I have framed was dated as being published a week after his death. This one, however, was dated the day before we found him on the perimeter road, a week before he died. Next was Carrie's. Prior to reading Jay's posts, I had only heard about her once. A week after the incident in the yard, I saw an obituary for her in the paper. I found a copy of her official obituary online, and, just like with Ryan's, this one was dated a week before the published one too. There was one detail I almost missed. Jay's obituary file was 2 pages. Both Ryan and Carrie's obituary files were 1 page only. I scrolled to the second page and saw a note. This just came in. Be careful. E. It wasn't Jay's handwriting and there was a date stamp on the bottom of the page, the same date as on the obituary. Before I could even process what was in front of me, Mary knocked on my door. I let her in and sat her down on the couch. Something isn't right, I said. He wasn't scheduled to work, I said. I left her alone in my room while she read through everything. I went to the kitchen and grabbed a bottle of whiskey and went back to the living room. After a couple hours, I had downed half the bottle before Mary walked into the room. Thanks. Mary just nodded and sat on the edge of the bed. She took a swig from the bottle and laid back. Do you really think he's gone? I don't know what to think anymore. Whoever this person is, knows something though. I backed out of the room, get some rest, I said while pulling the door closed.
That last one tasted like fear and poor decisions. Let's see what the next bite serves. Hope you're hungry.
I am one of the unlucky ones. I spent every moment among abled with this crippling feeling of unbelonging. Sure, I had friends in my senseless community. It was not enough. And maybe it was ungrateful of me, I couldn't contain this urge to be normal. Son is sure grumpy today, isn't it? My brother gave me an encouraging pat on the shoulder and said, I'm sure the parietal implant will give you everything you need. The evening before the surgery, I couldn't brush off the uneasiness. The charming smell of Bascoro's dinner was my only distraction. Almost everyone would support my decision to get the parietal implant. It was recently patented and vigorously tested in private experiments but not yet widespread for the public. Though Bascoro would still be concerned about unnecessary risks. It was his last chance to change my mind. Though, it is ultimately your choice, he added, staring into the window. I didn't have to see his face to know he had that grumpy look. I can admit that bitter envy is clouding my judgment. But if I don't see it through, then I will spend my years with doubts and regret. It'll get better in just a couple of hours. The familiar voice of my doctor rang through the door. It opened with an inviting creak. He picked up a new pair of gloves and put them on with a loud pop of plastic in preparation for testing my senses. I was disturbed by my doctor after 2 hours of a feverish nap. Time to test, he eagerly said and got a triangle. Its metal glittered in the sun rays. Reflections were painfully blinding due to the headache. Time was moving so excruciatingly slow, I couldn't wait for my honor. The doctor hit the triangle with a stick. It was silent. I looked at the doctor in confusion since I could hear steps behind the door and the wind outside. He stared into my eyes searching for a result. I shifted uncomfortably in the chair. Even if I did, I won't be able to say specifically what, I replied. Though, and I couldn't tell if it was my imagination, I could almost feel the neuron paths being generated as the new information that I couldn't discern yet is being processed. The pain was minor, it was lingering in the background of my conscience. When I could see clouds last enough to cover me all the way through to my home, I was relieved to get proper rest back home. Scorching pain hit my ears, a roaring scream was tearing my mind apart. I jolted out of bed and everything was rolling before my eyes as I was trying to find balance under unending torture. The screeching was unbearable, it took seconds, a negligible amount usually, but painfully long in this moment, to get a hold of the situation and shut my ears with palms. It didn't get any quieter. My wide-opened eyes looked around in despair. Where is this torturous sound coming from, and why can I not possibly block it out even slightly? Sweat was covering my neck as I was panting from excruciating pain, still helplessly holding my hands on my ears in lack of anything else I could do. Headache was pulsating in my head as if drills were rearranging my brain matter with each thrust of pain. I crawled whimpering to the corner of the room, trying to curl up in an embryo pose. My human intelligence regressed to the basic existence of a primitive creature that could feel nothing but this unending pain. My mind was blank for an unknown amount of time and, slowly without being conscious about it, I came to my senses and it was finally quiet. My body felt frozen and it was scary to move, almost if slight flick of a finger would bring torture back. I slowly opened my eyes and cautiously sat down, trying to process what had happened. One thing was clear: the scream I supposedly heard wasn't a sound. My thoughts were like lazy flies rumbling, trying to get a hold of the whole picture. My mind felt like a sore body on the next day of the most extensive exercise. I felt somewhat like an animal that barely escaped a predator. Yet, it was lurking. I had to think fast. The sun. I heard the sun. I kneeled so I wouldn't be hit by sun rays, and my trembling hand closed the curtain with a struggle because of an uncomfortable angle. I collapsed right there on the floor under the windowsill. I was taking deep, comforting breaths, trying to sort out what had happened, what I felt. I clutched my finger in the palm, and instead of burning sensation I heard echoes of the voices from far away. I got up and started changing for an emergency doctor's visit. Danger wasn't immediate, and I wasn't sure if I could explain myself without being sent to a psychiatrist checkup. And so I couldn't call an ambulance. I picked up my phone and stared at the screen with a few concerned messages from friends and family. What should I say? I was really insistent on getting this implant. It feels embarrassing to admit it wasn't a great idea after all. I decided to put it off worrying everyone until I'm sure it is serious and long-term. I copy-pasted, "I'm doing good. Resting. Getting a checkup today. Thanks for the concern," with slight changes to each person depending on my relationship with them. I put the phone down and started brainstorming how to cover all of my skin. I put on long clothes and gloves. At first, I thought that an umbrella should cover my face and neck, but the possibility of pain hit me like a whip. A vivid memory from long ago made me shudder. Once reflected light in my car's mirror hit me in the eyes, and it almost made me lose control of the vehicle. An umbrella is not safe enough. Is it appropriate in this situation to dress like I'm actually invisible? I have bandaged my face, put a scarf around my neck and put sunglasses on. During that, I received a call on my phone and struggled to accept the call both mentally and physically. Physically, because the touch screen is not responsive enough to my gloves material, and mentally because it was Bascoro. "Yeah, everything is good. I'm going to the doctor right now for a checkup," I replied, with hopes my voice wasn't shaking. "Alright, I'll be right there." Before I could even protest, he ended the call. "You can't escape the inevitable." I kept stuttering as he was patiently looking at me. "I don't know. Something went terribly wrong and I was in so much pain because," I took a raspy breath, "I heard the sun." He snorted. A mean-looking nurse heard me out while barely paying attention. She glanced at me with a mix of annoyance and disturbance. She took my measurements, suddenly swore and walked off in a rush. I felt myself going increasingly pale. I was furious. The adult patients that were permitted to have experimental implants were possessing some sort of a curious pair of genes, one that would allow the sharpest sixth sense, and one that would apparently cause loss of sixth sense at the same time. Scientists wanted to find out why. "Your attitude is the reason why it is so painful." "Sun is not sentient," I said with a shaking voice. My blessing, my curse. I always hear it now. It is loud during the day when the sun is looming over my existence. It is quiet at night, where the moon is a pathetic reflection of the sun's light in its absence. I was going through life, oblivious to the overwhelming presence of the star. Everything I hear, feel, think is touched by the sun.
Still with us? Good. That last one was just the warm-up. Let's go deeper.
When we turn 18, we get the name of our soulmate, by Thewackwaffle. Part 1, Part 2, Final. I thought it was normal for cities to not have any jails. I thought it was normal for cities to give their citizens soulmates. I never really understood how it worked. All that we were told was that there were the matchmakers, who were responsible for making the matches, and sending out the tiny slips of paper that determined each citizen's love life, and future. No one ever saw the matchmakers. No one knew how they were recruited, no one knew how they worked. All anyone knew was that it worked. Where I lived, there has never been a filing for divorce. The matchmakers are never wrong. Each citizen received their paper on their 18th birthday. Inside the piece of paper, there was nothing except a name. The name of your supposed soulmate. There was no telling how you would come across this person, no when or how. All anyone knew was that it would eventually happen. We were allowed to tell other people, allowed to ask around, try and seek out people that had the same name as the one on the paper, but it didn't matter. It couldn't be forced. Of course, literal eternal love and happiness does not come without rules. Every citizen had to follow the rules. They weren't too strange, and seemed like a small price to pay for what you were getting in return. Most of the rules were simple. To name a few, there was no going outside, under any circumstances, after 2 a.m. No pets, blood tests, etc. There were also rules that we weren't allowed to know until we were older. We got the new rules on our 18th birthday, the same day we got our matchmaker paper. We called them slips. As I got older, I realized that our city was special, and that other cities didn't have what we had, but I didn't care. Life was good, life seemed simple. Our city was like a little paradise. It was happy. It was without issue. Usually, I wouldn't have believed in such things like soulmates, especially as I got older, but it was hard to argue with evidence. My parents had gotten married in their late 20s, and have stayed happily married ever since, both of their names matching what was on their slips. My older sister Caitlin got her slip last year, and though she's been through her fair share of failed relationships, she's currently in a happy one with some guy named Roger. I don't think I need to tell you the name that was on her slip. I wished Caitlin still lived with us. We used to share a room, but ever since she moved out, it feels empty with just me in it. By some miracle, I eventually fell asleep, my brain finally exhausted after hours of wondering what tomorrow was going to bring. I swung my legs out of bed, my heart pounding in my chest as I tried to compose myself. I wanted to pull on a shirt and shorts as fast as possible, rush to the kitchen to get the envelope I knew would be addressed to me, but I didn't. I didn't want to be one of those people whose entire lives suddenly revolved around trying to find their soulmate. I needed to be calm. Taking a few even breaths, I slowly put on a shirt and some basketball shorts, before opening my door. Chatter, and the smell of waffles hit my senses instantly as I stepped out of my room. Turning the corner, I stopped, grinning. "Ah, you seriously thought I would miss your birthday? Get real," she said, matching my grin as she looked at me. "Damn, you got tall," she said, looking at me. "He got it from his old man." My dad chimed in, and Caitlin rolled her eyes. Besides my height, I got a lot from my dad. I got his warm brown eyes, and I got his wavy, dirty blonde hair that I had always kept medium length. I looked so much like my dad that my mom always chimed in saying how I got her nose and smile. "Happy birthday, Han," my mom said from the counter, giving me a soft smile. "These are almost done, and we'll go out for your birthday dinner later tonight," she said, gesturing at the waffles, and I smiled. "Birthday waffles for the birthday boy." My dad chimed in, putting an arm around my mom, and the simple movement made me remember something I forgot in the midst of the excitement. Is it here?" I asked them, trying to keep my voice even. My sister nodded, understanding what I was talking about. "On the front table." My legs felt like rubber as I walked the few steps into the hallway, instantly seeing the stark white envelope on the table. I picked it up. I walked back to the kitchen, all eyes on me as I turned the envelope over, trying to act calm, act normal. To peoples registered as 18 years as older, the following rules will come into effect. 1. Under no circumstances is anyone 18 years or older permitted in city waters. This includes all local rivers within city limits. 2. Under no circumstances will anyone 18 years or older be allowed to watch the television on the 14th of every month. 3. Under no circumstances is anyone 18 years or older permitted to use faucets after 12 a.m. This includes sinks, bathtubs, and showers. 4. Under no circumstances is anyone 18 years or older permitted to use any kind of elevator after 9 p.m. 5. Under no circumstances is anyone 18 years or older permitted to share their rules with peoples under the age of 18. Avery. Some things made more sense now, like why I never saw adults kayaking in the river like I saw them do in other cities. I had told myself for a long time that once I got my slip, that I wouldn't focus too much on it, but my mind kept coming back to the name that was burned into my mind. Avery. My friends were waiting for me at the bus stop eagerly. There was Jennifer, who was usually pretty quiet, and who I'd known since preschool. There was Joseph, who was a bit of a daredevil and a jock who I'd met during my freshman year. Lastly, there was Charles and Sophia, twins who were never separated, and who I'd bonded with sophomore year over our love for horror movies. Looking at us as a group looked weird, but we worked, and had fun with each other. I was bombarded with the same question as I got close to them. "Isn't there a chick in your history class named Avery?" Joseph offered, and I nodded. "Yeah. I'm trying not to think about it too much, I don't want to become one of those people who become obsessed with it," I said, although the name was really all I could think about. My friends dropped it after that, all except Joseph. He would chime in every few minutes, rattling off girls that he knew, all with the name Avery. He was still talking about it as the bus came, and as we walked up to the school. He really didn't have an off button, which meant that I was left to try and tune him out, nodding my head in agreement every few minutes. Everything else aside, the school day went pretty smoothly. People wished me happy birthday in the halls, occasionally asking who I got on my slip. After school, I still had time before I had to head home and start working on homework, so as usual, I met outside the school with my friends. The day had gotten progressively hotter as it went on, and by the time school was let out, it had reached the point of uncomfort. Most of my friends were already waiting for me, and as I got closer they were already in conversation. "Balls hot man, we should go claim a spot by the river before it gets too crowded," Joseph was saying, to which my other friends nodded in agreement. The river he was referring to was the biggest in the city, almost cutting it in half. It was a popular hangout spot, and my friends and I had been going there for ages. But now, my throat felt tight. None of my friends had turned 18 yet, since I had an extra year of preschool when I was a kid. They didn't know the new rules. "Are you crazy? It's like 90 degrees out here," Jennifer said, raising her eyebrows. Not wanting to act suspicious, I decided that I would go, but I wouldn't go in. Under any circumstances. Alright, let's go, but I can't stay long, I have my birthday dinner with Catelyn and my parents. I said, to which Joseph pumped his fist. I took a few, even breaths to remind myself that I was fine, and that I would stay on the shore. Jennifer and Joseph were the first to the river, instantly pulling up their jeans and taking off their socks and shoes as they dipped them into the river, sighing with the relief that the cool water provided from the hot weather. I desperately wanted to be there with them, swimming in the river and enjoying the nice weather, but the rules were very clear. I sighed, sitting down a few feet away from the water, my legs out in front of me, watching as my friends splashed each other with the water. I just had to hold out until they had their birthdays, and then I wouldn't have to make excuses. I could handle a few more months. Oi! Come on, birthday boy, get in the water. Charles yelled, splashing water in my direction as he was ankle deep in it, a few feet away from where it dropped off into deeper waters. I smiled, shaking my head as I adjusted my legs to make myself more comfortable. Nah, I'll be the one to drive you guys to the hospital when you get hypothermia. I yelled back, to which I could see his eyes roll from here. Ah, we can't have that. Joseph called, wading back to where I was. I command the birthday boy to get hypothermia with the rest of us. Joseph said, smirking as he approached me. I felt a trickle of unease as he approached me. I stood up to move away, but just then he swooped down and picked me up over his shoulder. Joseph played for the football team, and I always admired his strength, but this was the first time I was afraid of it. Joseph, stop. Put me down. I yelled, panic rising in my voice, struggling to escape his arms as he was carrying me to the water. My heart pounded wildly in my chest, as a rising fear crept up my throat. He outmatched me in size and strength, and my struggles were fruitless. I'm serious, Joseph, put me the fuck down. I yelled, to which he gave a little laugh. You're always so serious, Theo, loosen up. Live a little. He replied, and I could see he was in the water now, wading further in. I looked at my friends, wide-eyed, but they were giggling like it was a joke. As he got closer to the drop-off, I struggled harder, hitting him on the shoulders. I wasn't weak by any standards, but Joseph was built like an ox, almost all muscle. Fear closed my throat so tightly, I couldn't breathe. Come on, everyone in the water. He said, motioning with his head to my friends, who obliged, standing on the edge of the drop. Alright, on 3, we'll all jump in together. He put his hands on my waist, and I knew what was coming. 1. 2. He started, rocking back and forth. Joseph, stop. Stop. I yelled, punching him harder, but it didn't make any difference. 3. I heard the splashes of my friends jumping in, just as I was launched a few feet into the air. I shut my eyes tightly as images rapidly flashed through my mind. I saw myself at my 9th birthday party, saw myself applauding at Catelyn's graduation. Rapid images throughout my life flashed before me. It felt like an eternity before I hit the water. Once again, I had the wind knocked out of me, and I could feel myself sinking. I couldn't move, I couldn't breathe. I shakily pushed myself onto my hands and knees, trying to get my breathing under control, my thoughts moving at the speed of light. I felt oddly lightheaded, my body drained and exhausted. I wanted to look around for my savior, but I couldn't. My vision had started to go black, as my exhausted body finally collapsed. It was a boy, who looked around my age with dark, messy hair and who was looking at me with 2 dark blue concerned eyes, who looked relieved as I opened my eyes. Good. You're awake. Come on, we need to move. He said quickly, looking behind him. Confusion clouded my mind. Who are you? And where am I? I said, trying to keep the fear out of my voice. The boy looked back at me. My name is Avery. I can explain everything later, but we really have to go.
Still with us? Good. That last one was just the warm-up. Let's go deeper.
Yesterday evening, a little after 6, my wife and I were in the kitchen cooking dinner when my 6-year-old, almost 7, son Kyle walked in from the back patio. He was holding a folded piece of paper in his hand and had a strange look on his face. My son is constantly drawing, and loves to read and write, so this usually wouldn't have stood out to me at all, but he'd just come in from hitting the baseball off the tee and really had no reason to be holding a piece of paper. Dear Kyle, I know this note may sound scary, but grown-ups don't know how friendships can grow when kids are just left to be kids. You're growing as fast as a weed. Last night off the tee, I think we would make perfect friends. You're a kid through and through, even if just for pretends. One is just rude, church-going, pure, holy, devout. I've got an idea for me and you getting together. Don't tell your dad. Just come by yourself. I'll be dressed as an elf, and we can even hold hands. You will. You really will, Kyle. We will have, oh my, so much fun. So I'll see you at 3. I knew immediately it wasn't a prank. Was this sicko really watching Kyle's game? What would have happened I hadn't seen him with the letter? I flipped the note over, and on the back was some more text. I couldn't read it at first, but quickly realized it was written backwards. I'm guessing so Kyle couldn't have read it. To read it, I had to hold it up in front of a mirror. If your mom flaps her hole, or your dad tells a soul, I'm afraid things might get rather gory. On the 10th of July, 1995, a woman named Susie went missing. Unlike you and me. And in time I had gotten my fill. I threw her away. And to my great dismay, the hunger I felt plagued me still. And that hunger can no longer hide. Now that you know what I'm capable of, more than both of you can comprehend. If one word is spoken, then children get broken. And Susie will have a new friend. And, maybe the worst part, was Suzanne's address. 3 Orange Circle. I'm supposed to meet with the detective later this evening. Download the free audiobook.
That last one tasted like fear and poor decisions. Let's see what the next bite stirs. Hope you're hungry.
I was a master at hiding. But it wasn't for a good reason. I crawled under the porch, scraping my elbows and getting splinters in my palms, but I fit inside. It was actually quite spacious compared to most my hiding spots. I couldn't sit up all the way, but I had plenty of room to spread out my limbs. Of course, I was also getting covered in dirt. It had rained a few days ago, so the mud was still a little wet. I wrapped myself in my blankie the best I could and settled in for the night. That voice was not the voice of my mother, scratchy from all the smoking and screeching she did. It was sweet, like honey. I turned over to see the dim outline of a woman, lying on her stomach next to me. She had a pretty butterfly necklace and was just as dirty as I was. 6. How did I know this woman again? I didn't think I did. 6. The woman gasped. You're all grown up then. I'm so happy. She sighed pleasantly and stroked my hair. I'd never felt so cozy in my life. What's your name? I asked. Lily chuckled. Just like me then. Could never get enough of Scrabble. But I guess you're still too young to play that, huh? I nodded. Lots of words. I want to play it though. I like the tiles. Would you play with me? When you wake up in the morning, go to the police station. Ask for an officer by the name of Lowell Joyce. Tell him where to find Lily, okay? Under your back porch. He'll come and he'll get me, okay? And then maybe we can play Scrabble. I'll help you understand the rules. Good night, Alex. When I woke up the next morning, I heard Lily's voice. Go now. Your dad's gone to work. I'll tell you how to get to the station. Rubbing my eyes, I crawled out from under the porch and went into the house to grab my shoes and a coat. I shivered in the frosty cold. But I thought Lily was right behind me. After my shoes and coat were on, I started walking. It was long enough to get to the neighbor's house. I really can't remember how long it took to get to the police station, although I have no idea why no one pulled over to see what the hell a 6-year-old in dirty pajamas was doing walking alongside the road. Lily kept guiding me onward. Wait. Okay, cross the street now. Turn right here. I nearly collapsed with exhaustion by the time I walked into the station. The guys out front chatting and having a good time didn't see me until I almost made it to the front desk. One of the other officers picked me up. Sure kid, sure, let's just get you someplace warm. Holy shit, your lips are blue. I remembered quietly scolding the man about watching his language. Shit was a bad word. I was given some warm cocoa and wrapped up in a blanket by the time an old man with a graying mustache sat by me. Hey kid. I'm Sheriff Joyce. What's your name? He asked. Lots of things blurred together at this point. I remember being taken back to my house and there were a lot of police cars and people around. The back porch was surrounded by yellow tape, and someone was taking a black bag away while my dad was in handcuffs. I tried to ask about what happened and who was Lily, but I always got shut down. I was too young to know. When I turned 16, Grandpa took me back to my dad's house. The whole thing had been bulldozed over. But I could still see the yellow tape wound around a few trees, faded and torn. After I'd drank it, he told me. Your actual mom. The woman who lived with your dad was not your mother. My granddad grabbed another beer. Lily was my daughter. I loved her so much, but when you were around 6 months old, she vanished. Grandpa took a deep breath before setting his unopened beer down. That's something I've never been able to understand. Lily told you to find me. And that she loved Scrabble. Grandpa took a shaky breath as he pressed the bag into my hands. Lily loved you so much. T.S. why she stuck around that bastard. You were her whole world. She was constantly taking pictures and sending them to us in the mail. Sometimes a mother's love can accomplish things that no human can do.
Sleeping yet? Didn't think so. Next story's up. And yeah, it's worse. You're welcome.
I was 21 years old on the day of Mother's funeral. A milestone day that was usually spent with friends, drinking yourself into a stupor. For me, it was a day of sitting in a small, dank room with Mother's coffin on a pedestal, surrounded by empty chairs. The funeral home director would have some of their employees attend the funeral if no guests showed up, which seemed like a good idea when it was first presented. However, seeing them shuffle in and sit emotionless in the back of the room filled me with a sense of shame. The thought that the only people, other than myself, who would attend her funeral did so out of obligation was too much to bear. I asked the director to send them away, and they left without a moment's hesitation. Most likely returning to their own friends and families, where they would live and never give that poor, lonely woman another thought. I couldn't blame them, though. Mother wasn't the type of woman who wanted to be remembered. She had spent most of her life in isolation due to a deep-seated distrust of people, a belief that had taken root shortly after I was born. It had something to do with a man showing up at our doorstep when I was still a baby and causing a scene. She never liked to go into details about the incident and would quickly change the subject. I once asked her if the man was my father. Her face turned red, and she screamed at me to go to my room. That was the last time I ever asked about the man or my father. I was 7. My name is Colin, but Mother always called me Lump, a nickname I acquired when I was still in school, before I was pulled out and placed in a homeschooling program. A group of older kids in 1st or 2nd grade picked on me mercilessly and would call me Lump until I cried. I was born with a lump on the side of my stomach about the size of a softball. It posed no health issues, and Mother constantly told me that we didn't have the money to have it removed. So, I lived with it and suffered the consequences of an uncaring healthcare system combined with the cruelty of children, but Mother did her best to help me feel better about it all. Why? I asked through sniffles and a tissue. Not gross at all. Now, no matter where I am and where you are, you'll have a bit of my love with you, right there by your side in that lump. She looked up into the rearview mirror to glance back at me. I had a love lump once, too. It was you, and now here you are. My little lump. She said with that silly baby voice that always made me laugh. We giggled about that the entire way home, and from then on, I was called Lump. She switched to working nights, and during the day, between naps, she made sure I was doing my schoolwork. She wasn't a great teacher, but she was patient and gave me all the attention she could. She worked herself ragged to take care of me, and that effort took a toll on her. I think she aged quicker than most people, primarily due to the stress of taking care of me on her own. Her fear of me being harmed in some way grew and grew. We spent most of our free time indoors, venturing out only to the grocery store or to the backyard, but we rarely did much more than that. The isolation made it impossible for either of us to make or have friends. She played with me whenever I asked, and for a time, I thought that was enough. We fought constantly about my desire to leave the tiny world she had created for us. I called it a prison, and she called it our home. I wanted to travel and explore, while she wanted to stay and wait. It wasn't until many years later that I began to realize just how deep her loneliness must have been. People are not meant to be alone, and when she died, that was a truth I learned very quickly. I attempted to carry on with my life as I had when she was alive, but the house was too quiet. Every creak and moan the house made reminded me of just how alone I was. Sitting at the dinner table and looking at her empty chair would cause me to weep. Not because I missed her, although I did, but I cried because I was alone. Truly alone. The first bit of happiness I experienced after her passing came when I learned that she had left me a sizable inheritance. I had grown up believing we were relatively poor, barely scraping by. She had been very smart with her money. A few extremely lucky investments and her decision to live a budget-friendly life resulted in a small tidy sum of money. It was a settlement she received from the incident with the man arriving at our house when I was a baby. He was the doctor who delivered me when I was born. Something in him had snapped, and the hospital paid Mother a hefty sum to smooth things over and to avoid bad press. It wasn't enough for me to retire on, but it was sufficient enough that I wouldn't have to work much and I wouldn't need to worry about that for a long time. The news felt like an anvil being lifted off my chest. I was 21 now, 21 and ready to spend Mother's money on my surgery. I was prepared to begin living my life the way I wanted, a life of discovery and without fear. I would get the lump removed. She scrunched her eyebrows at me. You get undressed and put this on. My face felt like it was on fire with embarrassment. It was my first time at the doctor's office, and I had almost accidentally shown my dinky to the nurse. She was pretty. The thought of her nearly seeing my dinky caused it to stir. I quickly tried to calm myself down while she was gone, thinking she might be back at any moment. The last thing I wanted to do was to show her my privates. Mother always said that was a sacred right that a beautiful soul had to earn. He was old. Older than Mother had ever been. His hair was still blonde, though, and it fell in small, tight curls across his forehead. His face was unshaven, and his breath stank even though his teeth were unnaturally white. His glasses sat on the tip of his nose as he stared at my side. "Interesting," he said quietly. He sat up straight and rolled back toward a machine before wheeling back with it. "What is this?" I asked. "It's going to be cold," he said, slightly annoyed. He licked his lips and then pursed them together as he looked up at me. He moved the wand around as he stared at the screen. I couldn't make heads or tails of what I was looking at. She left and closed the door behind her. The doctor looked at me and then back at the lump. I chuckled. Mother always told me my lump was filled with her love. She said it was my love lump. The doctor did not chuckle. "Well, that's just a load of horse shit," he quipped as he rolled back toward the counter. He grabbed a pen and began writing. "It's nothing at all. Just a type of cyst. Easy enough to eliminate with medication. I want you to take 2 of these for a week. That's 1 in the morning and 1 at night. Now say it back to me." "Okay. Twice a day with food. I've got it." "Perfect," he said, cutting me off. "Well, if that's everything, then I'll see you in a week." 14 pills. That's all it would take to erase this thing from my life. All it would have ever taken to have given me a better childhood. It was hard not to be mad at Mother. It felt unfair that she wouldn't be alive right now while I'm discovering this. That she's not here for me to scream at. That she wouldn't have to see me stomp my feet and smash the dishes felt unfair. There was a lack of just in the though that she wouldn't have to clean up after the mess I made. No. She wasn't there for any of that, but I did it anyway. I shouted until my voice went hoarse, and there were no more things to throw across the kitchen. I scooped up my first pill and swallowed it after dipping my lips under the faucet. I should have saved at least 1 cup to drink them down with, but my anger hadn't allowed me the opportunity to think about the future. I cleaned up the mess as best I could and went to bed. 3 days later, I was able to see my doctor. By this time, there was no doubt in my mind that the lump had grown. What was once the size of my fist was now easily twice as large. It weighed heavily on my side and pulled the skin taut, but it no longer hurt, and I no longer noticed the slithering I had felt the day before. As I sat down, he whipped out the ultrasound machine and abruptly reached for my shirt, beginning to pull it up. I swatted his hand away. "I don't have all day, young man. Now let me do my job and see what we've got here." The sound of my voice in the quiet office startled the doctor out of his stupor. He grabbed the ultrasound and began applying the clear jelly to it. He pressed it to my side again, and I was once more startled by how cold it was. He rubbed the wand back and forth, staring at the monitor. This continued for several moments, with only the sound of his hot, rank breathing breaking the silence. "There's nothing wrong with it," he said faintly, the wand still moving back and forth. "That doesn't make any sense," I said with a tinge of irritation as I grabbed the side of the monitor to pull it into view. "Haven't you ever heard the saying that it needs to get worse before it gets better?" he said through gritted teeth. "But But, I think I'm going to see about getting a second opinion about this. My eyes drifted to the ground. I could feel his eyes burning a hole through my forehead, and the air in the room felt thick from the tension. "They'll tell you the same thing I did, boy," he growled. "I've been practicing medicine since before you were born." His shouts followed me down the hallway and out of the building. I could faintly hear him from outside, and I sprinted towards the nearest bus stop a few blocks away. I arrived just as the bus opened its doors. I climbed the stairs and made my way to a seat, plopped down, and slouched in my seat. I knew it was unlikely that the doctor would have followed me this far or this quickly, but I shuddered at the thought that he might spot me riding past and take the opportunity to hurl more insults my way. As I sat slumped down and hiding, my phone rang. It was a number I did not recognize. This had to be the doctor. He was calling me to give me an earful. It rang in my hands as I stared blankly at the screen. There was nothing on earth that would make me answer that call. It finally stopped ringing. I tilted my head back in relief and stared at the gum stuck to the ceiling. Ding! My eyes shot back down. A voicemail. I pressed play and lifted the phone to my ear. What I heard wasn't the doctor. To my surprise, it was a young voice. A woman's voice. Kind and gentle. Her voice had a soothing quality to it that lulled me into a peace I hadn't felt since Mother was still alive. It brought me comfort, something I thought I would never know again. This was the day my life changed forever. Part 2.
Whew, telling gave me chills. But hey, we're just getting started. The next one's sharper. You'll see.
Does anyone know Mr. Hernandez? I just need to find him. Mr. Hernandez is a Latin American man, about 5'7" tall, with a small black mustache, or maybe he looks like me. Or maybe he looks completely different. I don't even know anymore. I just want him to give me my life back. Hey there, friend. Feel like playing a little game with me? Mr. Hernandez beamed. Well, how about I buy you a drink? That, I didn't turn down. After all, I came here to drown my problems. Mr. Hernandez bought us an entire bottle of whiskey and asked for 2 glasses, said it looked like I needed it. We sat down at a table and started drinking. All the while, he tried to dazzle me with stories. He talked about everything he could think of. My dear friend, if you could have one wish, what would it be? He said, draining his glass. I raised my glass as if to toast the idea. The place was empty except for the bartender, and even he was just rolling his eyes at us. Mr. Hernandez still didn't say a word. He just kept staring, like he didn't believe me, sizing me up suspiciously. I grew quiet. Deep down, I knew he was right. My life was a mess. A crappy office job that drained me, with a paycheck that barely covered rent. I was completely estranged from my family, even phone calls with my parents turned into arguments. And my girlfriend. I don't think she loved me anymore. Hell, I didn't think I loved her either. It all just came spilling out. Mr. Hernandez gave me a wide, satisfied grin. He looked like a man who just closed a deal. Then he reached across the table, hand outstretched. I didn't say a word. I shook his hand. So be it, my friend, he said. I had no idea how long we stayed at the bar that night, but when I woke up, I wasn't at home. I came to in some unfamiliar apartment. I'd never drunk so much in my life that I completely blacked out and went home to the wrong place. But here I was. Whatever, at least I made it into the building, I thought. All I wanted now was to get home and crash on the couch. Up on the 3rd floor, where we lived, I knocked on the door and called out for Beth, asking her to let me in since I didn't have my keys. I hoped she was home. I really didn't want to spend the night outside my own front door. And it wasn't Beth who answered. It was me. I just stood there in silence, staring, trying to process what the hell I was looking at. The me inside the apartment snapped at me, dragging me out of my confusion with an angry tone. I blinked, staring at myself. What the hell was this? There were two of me. I finally managed to mutter. Beth. What the hell is going on? Who is this guy? Beth didn't say a word. She just stepped back behind the door, as if trying to disappear from view. The other me turned to her and asked if she knew me, but Beth simply replied. I've never seen this man before in my life. Get the fuck out of here, asshole, or I'm calling the cops. He shouted, and slammed the door in my face. I figured I'd better go back to the apartment I'd woken up in. And sure enough, it was the same crappy place, the rundown apartment. But this time, I found a driver's license. It was issued to someone named Terrence, a really shady-looking guy. Exactly the kind of person you'd cross the street to avoid if you saw him walking toward you at night. But seriously, what the hell was going on? Who was this guy? And what was I doing in his apartment? And what the hell did Mr. Hernandez do to me? Of course, the bar was closed. I shouldn't have expected anything else, it was Sunday noon, after all. But the bartender was out front, stacking crates near the entrance, so maybe I had a bit of luck left. I asked about Mr. Hernandez, but he said he didn't know anything about him, had never seen the guy before in his life. Only yesterday, when he came into the bar with me. He said the two of us drank together until closing time, then left like we were best buddies. When I asked him what the guy looked like, the one Mr. Hernandez was drinking with, the bartender gave me a strange look. Then described someone who looked exactly like me. But when I pressed him, asking if the guy had looked the same all night long, he told me to quit with the crazy talk, and went back into the bar, locking the door behind him. I stood there, totally lost. I had no idea what was happening. No idea what to do. And that's when a car screeched to a stop beside me. A black Mercedes, windows tinted dark. Terrence, the old man began. Terrence, where's my damn stash? Terrence, he continued, I told you last time, give me what you promised. You said you had it. I was getting more and more nervous. My thoughts were spinning. Why was this guy calling me Terrence? What the hell did he want from me? And how the hell was I going to get out of this mess? And then I did the dumbest thing I could have done, I started explaining. Sir, I stammered, I don't know who you are, or what package you're talking about. Honestly, I don't even know who I am right now. The old man looked surprised for a moment, then gave a cheerful little smile and said, Terrence, you owe me big. You've got 2 days to give me what you promised. I slowly got to my feet and started walking, no real direction, just away. I didn't know where I was going, only that I needed peace. Some quiet. Once I made it out of the docks, I got my bearings. I was a little outside the city, but I still knew the way home, even if it didn't feel much like home anymore. I walked up to my old apartment. There were lights on, I could see our windows glowing. And there I was, or my double, standing in the window with Beth. They were kissing. Beth was laughing at something, and the other me was talking to her. It was already afternoon by the time I came to again in that rundown apartment. I felt like absolute shit, couldn't see out of my left eye, and I could barely breathe through what was probably a broken nose. It felt weird, being asleep on a Monday at noon, not at work, but honestly, I would have given anything to be back at that shitty old job of mine. That's when it hit me, I needed to talk to my double. Yeah, I can be a stubborn asshole, but I've got a brain, too. Maybe I could talk some sense into him. Figure out what the hell is actually going on. Fucking Hernandez. Luckily, it wasn't that hard. I lied to the security guards, said I was Josh's cousin, Josh being my old self, and that I had to pick up a package from him. I knew they wouldn't care. Those guys didn't give a shit about anything. I didn't have a choice. It was now or never. He wasn't paying attention, tapping away on his phone, so I grabbed my double by the lapels and shoved him into the bathroom next to us. There was just one intern in there, washing his hands, but I barked at him to get the fuck out, and he bolted without a word. My double just stared at me, clutching his phone, wide-eyed. "Josh, you said it yourself," he finally replied, cool as ice. "You wanted a new life." That's when I snapped. I punched him square in the nose, blood exploded everywhere. But Mr. Hernandez didn't fight back. He just sat there, blood gushing from his face, grinning at me, mouth full of red, teeth shining through the mess. So I hit him again. And again. And again, until he crumpled to the floor. I was serving time for crimes I never committed. At first, I kept thinking, if I ever get out of here, I'm gonna kill Hernandez. But then again, he was me now. If I died, I'd never have a shot at getting my life back. So eventually, I let it go. 5 years had passed. And finally, I was free. I knew exactly where I wanted to go first, I just didn't know what I'd do when I got there. I'd imagined this moment so many times, what I would say, how I would act, but now that it was happening, I stood frozen. Speechless. Josh, or the one in my body, spoke first. My double's face turned pale. His eyes widened in shock. He glanced back into the house and called out. "Oh God," he said, suddenly sounding relieved. "Finally, someone who knows something." I looked at him, wary. Was this a trick? Another setup? "I've only been in this body for 2 weeks," he said, excited and almost out of breath. "I don't even know who this guy is or what the hell is going on." "Wait," I cut him off, tense and suspicious. "You're not Hernandez?" "No. God, no," he stammered. "That bastard tricked me. Asked me all these weird questions." The kid kept rambling, but I didn't hear him anymore. I didn't care. He was just another puppet. Another victim of Mr. Hernandez. I looked up at the window. Beth was standing there. A little blonde girl in her arms, maybe 3 years old. And Beth's stomach. It was round again. I couldn't hold it in anymore. I broke down crying. The boy, Matthew, kept talking beside me. But I only had one thought in my head.
Need a break? Too bad. These stories don't wait, and neither do we. Next one's worse. In the best way.
I Didn't Dance with the Devil, by I Coldbeck Convinced. This is a small bar in Woodside, Queens, New York City. None of the musicians that play in this bar are fulfilling their goals of making it in the greatest city in the world, and you can tell which of them is a transplant here to follow a dream and those that have grown up here and know what kind of gig this is. This is the kind of gig where you're paid peanuts, the crowd is more absorbed in their shitty beers than your solo, and the only person who will discover you by the end of the night is an absolutely sloshed and lonely blonde that has a thing for bass players. Tonight, however, as I finished my 4th dirty martini and the aerial type on my screen began to blur, I noticed a new member of the regular Wednesday night band. He'd showed up late, overdressed in a white button-up shirt and silk, black suit. There had been some furious whispering between him and the band leader, but it seemed resolved once he pulled his fiddle from his case, shining with polish and obviously very well cared for even to someone who didn't know a damn thing about the instrument. I missed most of the conversation, but I did catch the well-dressed man's hiss. "Pretty girl," he said, and I melted into his side even though he smoldered. "Will you stay for the rest of the show?" I nodded numbly and he stood as the band returned to the stage and the patrons returned from their cigarettes.
Anyway, let's lighten the mood with something fun and... Nah, just kidding. It gets worse. Hit it.
Camp Shadow Wood, by Possible, Painting, 73. I'm a cop now, 28 years old, and my daily life is a grim procession of human misery. I've seen things that would curdle the blood of most people: accidents, violence, the raw aftermath of despair. But nothing, absolutely nothing, not even the most gruesome crime scene, has ever come close to the suffocating dread of the summer of '09. My parents, bless their well-meaning but utterly clueless hearts, were fed up with my perpetual computer screen tan. "Go outside, Peter. Get some fresh air. Make some friends," they'd chirp, oblivious to the digital sanctuary I'd built. So, with a sigh that felt heavier than my 15-year-old frame, they shipped me off to Camp Shadowwood, a name that even then sounded like a place where shadows lingered. It was deep in the Maine woods, shrouded in a perpetual twilight of ancient pines. The kind of place you had to cross this impossibly long, ancient, and perpetually creaking suspension bridge over a dizzying, fog-shrouded canyon just to reach. Each step on its rotting planks felt like a gamble, a descent into another world entirely. The first few days were a blur of typical summer camp tedium. The food was bland, the crafts were pathetic attempts at macrame, and the days dragged on with forced activities. The only reprieve came at night, around a crackling, spitting fire, where we'd huddle together, telling the usual urban legends: the hook-handed killer, the vanishing hitchhiker, tales designed to elicit nervous giggles and feigned shivers. Then, one particularly muggy night, Counselor Mark took over. He was in his late 20s, but looked older, his face etched with something beyond his years. He was lean, almost gaunt, with eyes that seemed to absorb all the light, holding too much shadow even in the fire's dancing glow. His voice, when he began to speak, was a low, gravelly whisper that seemed to slither through the air, making the fine hairs on my arms prickle and stand on end. "You kids think you know scary," he began, his gaze, heavy and unblinking, sweeping over our young faces, lingering for a fraction too long on each one. "Let me tell you about Jericho." That night, the camp was eerily quiet, too quiet. The usual chirping of crickets and rustling of leaves seemed muted, swallowed by an oppressive stillness. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling of the cabin, every shadow a monster, every creak of the old wood a phantom footstep. Then, it came. A scream. Not a playful, fake scream designed for a campfire story. This was a raw, guttural sound, ripped from the depths of terror, that tore through the night like a physical thing, shattering the fragile peace. Everyone jolted awake, a cacophony of gasps and panicked whispers filling the cabin. Counselors were yelling, their voices sharp with alarm, and the beams of their flashlights cut frantic arcs through the inky darkness outside. Travis was gone. The search was a chaotic, panicked nightmare. We fanned out, a disorganized mob of terrified kids and equally terrified counselors, calling his name, our voices hoarse and cracking with fear. Hours passed, each minute stretching into an eternity. The first faint streaks of dawn were just beginning to paint the eastern sky with a sickly, bruised purple when someone found it. In the communal ice chest, chilling next to bags of ice and soda cans, was Travis's head. Just his head. His eyes were wide open, staring blankly, frozen in a silent scream. His body was never found. Counselor Mark was arrested on the spot, his face still blank, devoid of any emotion. He didn't resist, just stared straight ahead as the handcuffs clicked into place. As the local police car, with Mark in the back and a veteran deputy driving, started across that old, rickety bridge, the very bridge that had felt like a gateway to another world, it happened. The car didn't swerve to avoid something. It veered. A deliberate, sharp, impossible turn. Right off the side. It plunged into the dizzying depths of the canyon below, a sickening, drawn-out crunch of metal and splintering wood echoing up from the abyss. The same James. The one who left Jericho in the woods. The one Mark, with that unnerving smile, had called a good guy. Jericho Vance. Age 13. Died of hypothermia. The report was clinical, detached, but the details were a punch to the gut. His body was found weeks later, deep in the woods, after the initial search had been called off. The file mentioned significant post-mortem decomposition, animal scavenging, and insect activity. A closed casket funeral. The poor kid didn't even get a proper goodbye. Just a name on a file, a tragedy swept under the rug. I'm supposed to take this to the chief tomorrow. Present my findings. But what do I say? Chief, I believe a 13-year-old ghost is decapitating bullies and counselors at Shadowwood. I'll be laughed out of the department. I'll lose my job, my career, everything I've built to escape that summer. They'll think I've cracked.
And now, as the hour gets cold, and the shadows stretch long into the corners of your room, it's time.
Yeah. Chew the spooky violin. But seriously? This next one? Even I didn't sleep after hearing it.
I've claimed something coming from you.
What? Just because I sleep in a coffin and collect cursed dolls?
Among other things. This is the final descent for the night. One last story, dragged up from the depths of the disturbed and deranged.
Go ahead. Turn off the lights. We dare you.
This is HorrorSlop.
Every night, my girlfriend wakes me up to tell the exact same joke, by point of no return dash. We have the same taste in music, movies, and even food. We laugh at the same dumb jokes, and know exactly how to comfort each other in times of need. She's the kindest, most gentle and loving girl I ever met. We even been talking about our plans for marriage, and how we would like to have kids of our own. That's why it hurts so much how it all went terribly wrong, in just 4 nights. I would also like to preface that Ellen doesn't have much of a family other than me, and some very distant aunts that she never met and doesn't even know their names. I was born in a big family, with 4 siblings and plenty of cousins that were always visiting, and even helping out when we got in trouble. Ellen has none of that. She doesn't have any siblings, and her father was an alcoholic, abusive freak that died when she was young. Her mother was a very kind and inspiring person, that took care of the family by herself for many years. And almost a second mother to myself. So when she passed away last year, it hurt us both for a long time. Knock, knock. Knock, knock. She was caressing my hair, gently, while sitting in bed and looking below at me. Knock, knock. Knock, knock. What is it, Ellen? Fine, I accepted, mostly because I was expecting some kind of surprise. Ellen wasn't the type to do what she was doing for no reason. Who's there? I kept looking at her, dumbfounded. What was that supposed to mean? This time, she wasn't even touching me. Just sitting in bed, looking at me with that same smile. But her eyes seemed larger, and she blinked in longer intervals. I looked at the clock. Once again, 3:27 a.m. Ellen, come on. What is it? I got work in a few hours, can't have the luxury of waking up in the middle of the night to answer knock-knock jokes. Answer it. Knock, knock. Knock. I sighed, but also let a small laugh escape. It was creepy, of course, but she was also my Ellen. So it didn't bother me as much as it should. Fine. Who the fuck is there? I answered in a playful tone. Not me. So don't answer the door. For some reason, I felt a chill down in my spine. It was the same answer as before, and I still didn't get what it meant. But the way she said it, with a strange, monotone voice, contrasted well with her smile and the fact that I had no idea of what she meant by that. Next day, we talked again about what was happening. She was very evasive with my questions, and I barely got her to say anything. It was almost as if she couldn't talk about it, which was very strange, considering we talk about pretty much everything. I told her I needed to be well rested for work, something she should understand well, and wasn't liking her little gag every night. She just nodded. And I decided to not press further, as I didn't want to hurt her feelings and had work to attend to. When I got back home, we had dinner, watched a movie and went to bed. Knock, knock. I'm not answering your fucking joke, Ellen. Stop it. I got up in a sudden movement. Knock, knock. Who's there? I asked, feeling as if it was the only way out of that nightmare. I stayed in the couch as the day rose, and once Ellen woke up, she was acting normal again. Even asked me why I wasn't in bed. I didn't answer. In fact, I didn't speak to her and simply left for work. She seemed very upset, but I wouldn't do anything about it. Once I got to work, I called my friend, told him everything that was happening in as much detail as I'm describing now. He didn't seem as worried as I figured, but we agreed in making an appointment for next week. Now I just needed to convince Ellen to come with me. I received plenty of text messages from her. She seemed very worried, sad and even confused. She apologized a lot, and it broke my heart a little. I felt bad. I shouldn't have, but I answered her, and made her promise it wouldn't happen again. I also told her about the appointment, and she seemed reluctant but agreed to go with me. So we made up. This was Ellen, after all. The girl I knew ever since I was 6 years old. The woman I loved and that had taken care of me for years. And as much as that strange behavior creeped me out, she wasn't doing anything particularly frightening, or even dangerous. So for a brief while, I convinced myself I should give her another chance. When I returned home from work, we stayed together. She even prepared my favorite meal. Ellen was acting as gentle and caring as I always remembered, and I slept with her in our bedroom, even though I was still a bit reluctant. I couldn't believe it. She promised me she wouldn't. Not me. So don't answer the door. To my surprise, I was actually able to sleep. Probably because I hadn't been able to rest since last night. The following morning, I went back to not saying anything to Ellen, only very limited responses. I was expecting her to act same as yesterday, trying to apologize, but she didn't. Mostly she didn't say anything, almost as if she had accepted it. She also looked tired, or at least a bit weak. I went to work, but I couldn't stop thinking about her. Didn't receive any messages either. Once I got back, we had the most silent dinner I ever had in my life. And she barely ate anything. I decided to let her have the bedroom and sleep on the couch. I wasn't sure if it would stop her, but held on to the hope that she wouldn't go downstairs only to tell me the same knock-knock joke again. I covered myself with a blanket, shaked off that uneasy feeling and tried to sleep. I had a deep sleep, without dreams. Felt like I was lost in darkness. Then I heard breathing. Opened my eyes to see Ellen, standing above me, looking at me with big, fixated eyes and dilated pupils that didn't seem to belong in such a completely neutral expression. Watching me sleep. I almost screamed in terror. jumped out of the couch, and her eyes followed me as I stumbled through the dark room, creating distance between us. For a moment I was able to glance at the clock above the table, 3:27 a.m. Then I heard a knock on the front door. Instinctively, I looked in that direction. It was followed by another knock. And another. Someone almost pounding at the door. John. John, can you hear me? Open the door, please. John, please open the door. I beg you, John. Open the door, it's serious. She's not me, I swear. She's not me. I tried to look for my phone, see if I could call the police, or at least someone that I know. But I left it downstairs. All I have is Ellen's laptop, and it's where I'm writing this right now, to get advice. Because I can't go downstairs. The corridor is dark, very dark, almost as if the shadows were leaning into the room. And I can hear a faint, scratching sound coming from below.
And there you have it, dear listeners. One final scream, echoing into the void.
Yeah. Void screams, eternal darkness, I get it. Can I eat now?
We're still on air, Roxy.
Oh no, just the spooky FCC is gonna haunt us for breaking the mood.
If you enjoyed tonight's descent into depravity, don't forget to like, subscribe, and what does he always say?
Stab that bell icon like it's your ex possessed by a demon, and leave a comment telling us what story made you question. I have choices.
And if you survive the night, we'll be waiting.
Same dat time, same that crypt.
You're the reason we have complaints, you know that.
You're welcome.